Hello everyone and welcome to the Aptos CTRL+MOVE Educate series run by Encode Club. So before we get started with our first workshop, I've got a few admin bits that I'll take you through. I'm Blake, I'm one of the team on Encode Club, and Encode Club is a global community of top developers, professionals and talented students in emerging tech. We run lots of events. Educates are one of the four main types that we do. We've got educates, boot camps, hackathons and incubators. So educates and boot camps typically are the more educational side of the programs that we run. Hackathons, as I'm sure you all know, are focused on building, and incubators are where we take these early stage projects and we push them into startup phase. So as I say, we're doing an Educate right now. And I'd just like to say as well that we've recently announced our new platform. So hopefully all of you have joined through there. If you have been to an Encode program before, then you'll notice all the nice new UI. And if you are new, then enjoy. So we'll talk about the Educate a tiny bit. So it's 2 weeks long. The idea is to introduce you to Aptos and the Aptos ecosystem that is run on the programming language Move. And a nice little thing about this program is that it's going to tie in with a hackathon that I'll speak about in a second. So here's the structure a bit more in detail. So we've got workshops on Tuesday and Thursday this week, and then Tuesday and Wednesday next week. Now, there has been a little change to the schedule. So just to make you all aware that the in-person hub meetup is going to be moved to September the 22nd at 6:30 p.m. BST. So we, in the last sort of 5 or 6 months, have moved into a new building in Shoreditch. It's going to be great fun, lots of nice people that are in the building all the time. So it's a chance not only to connect to the people also doing this program, but other builders in the crypto space. I mentioned the hackathon that's coming up. Please feel free to have a look at these QR codes. I'll put a link in the chat later on when the workshop starts. But one of the nice things about having done this program is you'll have seen lots of what Aptos has to offer, and you may even want to start building on it yourself. And there's a hackathon going on right now that after these workshops you can have a look at and hopefully apply to. So check out these QR codes. We've also got a link to the Encode Club X account, which you'll find announcements about all upcoming programs for other things that you're interested in. If you enjoyed this Educate, then definitely check out our boot camps. And also we've got some hackathons coming up in Q4 that you'll definitely be interested in. Okay, so that's pretty much the admin side wrapped up. So I'm now going to introduce the CEO of Encode Club, Anthony Beaumont, and he is going to talk to you and introduce you to the Aptos ecosystem. I'm going to hand over now. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Blake. Thank you very, very much. Very nice to see you all. Thank you very much for joining. I am indeed Anthony, and I am indeed the CEO of Encode. So, right, let me get my slides up. 1 second. Right. Does that look like a presentation, Blake?
Looking good.
Oh, smashed it. Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. I guess I can start with me. First of all, the purpose of this program. So we have 2 types of people who'll be watching this. One, well done, you intrepid folk. You're watching it live. Thank you very much. 2, some of you are watching in different time zones asynchronously. This content that we're about to give you over the course of broadly 4 or 5 sessions has 2 purposes. One is to educate you about Aptos and Move and building within the Aptos ecosystem, the ecosystem we've worked with multiple times before, like very much, and think you'll do good things within. And 2 is to prepare you for an ongoing hackathon. I'm sure Blake will put the link, that is going on, run by our friends at Dora Hacks with Aptos. So we're educating and encouraging you to build within that event. These workshops should form a body of, let's say, convincing, teaching, educating, so that you build good things within that event, or more broadly within the Encode ecosystem. You'll have a set of speakers that will, if you want to join the workshops, guide you through the workshops over the next few days and a few weeks. And if you are, as Blake says, based in London, there is a special meetup on in a few weeks' time for you to come together, visit the Encode London space, and broadly network with other movers and Aptosians. I'm going to talk you through a very broad overview, which I guess could be surmised as why you should build on Aptos. We'll go into more detail. We're going to talk about Move on Thursday. We're going to talk about DeFi specifically. We're going to talk about the broader Aptos ecosystem across the various workshops. But I'm going to start with a sort of general overview and convincing view of Aptos. I'm not aiming to make this too technical. I'm going to kind of go through the highlights, etc. And as you can ask questions, though broadly the best place to have those answered is on Discord and also via our beautiful platform. A word on our beautiful platform. You are one of, at least within the first thousands of users. Encode has tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of developers go through our ecosystem every year, learn, build, start companies, get jobs. We've wanted for a while to enhance that experience, so we launched a brand new platform. That platform is an enhanced experience for hackathons, bootcamps, educational series, accelerators, which you've probably already seen because you've accessed this workshop through it. When it gets to hackathons, it gets even more fun. So congratulations being part of that early access by being part of this program, and do refer to it for your experience overall. Okie dokie. What I'm going to do is make sure that I have my notes on my phone, and because I can't actually see the rest of my screen with this setup, and then let's go on it. So we're going to start with a sort of brief history of Aptos. That history is broadly focused on a kind of story of something called DM. So DM, for the some of you may remember, may not remember, was quite an influential part of crypto history. It was a project founded by Facebook, which aimed to be a sort of global stablecoin currency or broad set of blockchain innovations run within Facebook and set up as a separate project called DM. It's made a big impact. It hired a lot of researchers, some quite famous ones based in London, but ultimately faced not technical, but regulatory problems. The regulators didn't like the idea of Facebook having so much power, particularly they wanted to launch a stable coin, a currency rather. They didn't really want Facebook to have such economic might, quite frankly. Now, this is in stark contrast to more recent attempts by companies like Circle and USDT and the mainstreamification of stablecoins within the financial environment. I'm just going to have a little bit of water. First things first. So DM hired quite a lot of researchers, quite a lot of influential people, and actually Aptos is not the only project to emerge from it. There are multiple. There are the SUI team. Now SUI is a main competitor to Aptos. It also uses the Move programming language we'll talk about later. There is the Linera team, who is some of you may have done our events that have involved Linera, and he's some of the developers behind Celestia. So it's influential quite significantly within the crypto sort of dynasty. There's a very famous professor called George Denisis, who's head of the security department at UCL, and one of the founders of Miston, for instance, who's quite senior within the whole DM movement. So the first thing to understand Aptos is to understand where it came from, and where it came from was the Facebook DM project, which splintered off when it became regulatory impossible to various protocols that are using the underlying technology. Important. Now, broadly, especially with the links to Facebook, we're trying to run Web3 like Web2. The efficiencies, the security, importance of security, the reliability of Web2 within Web3. This is the broad pitch. And there's a few different ways. Aptos is an L1. It's a blockchain. And the blockchain usually competes on its speed, on its scalability, on its security, but also the differentiating factors are the consensus, the programming language, the broad power of the ecosystem, and different protocols make different trade-offs. Probably most prominently the Solana ecosystem, the Ethereum ecosystem. It's quite clear and actually understanding Aptos within the spectrum of those protocols is quite useful. It's quite clear the big differences in Ethereum and Solana. You have the difference between the Solidity programming language and the Rust programming language. Solidity being JavaScript based and Rust not. You have different ways of doing consensus around proof of stake, different ways of handling security and speed and decentralization. I would say Aptos is somewhere in the middle of those two protocols, but we'll talk about the specifics in due course. What Aptos is going to pitch is performance and reliability. It's not going to go off huge decentralization, though there's a fair bit of it through delegated proof of stake. It's not going to sacrifice reliability for performance. It's going to try and broach those or breach those two. We also have the concept of parallel execution, which we'll talk about in due course, which allows this performance and reliability to be maintained. We'll need to have a robust consensus, a way for us to come, a reminder about what consensus is. It's a way of blockchain. Blockchain fundamentally is a database structure. And when you have a database, we need it to have an up-to-date state. That state needs to be something that every actor within the system agrees with. In a blockchain, you have many people that need to agree and no central party that is the source of truth. So we need some concept of consensus and consensus algorithms and protocols. And Aptos has a very robust one, delegated proof of stake. And we need to have both a way to interact with it that is convenient and good for developers, but also versus Solidity offers some degree of security. And that is the MOVE programming language, one specifically invented by the DM research team and used by three major protocols. Chat might be able to name them: Aptos, Sui, and Movement, which is not a Libra, a DM. Libra was the other name for the project, a DM team, but came about a bit later. Okay, so our pitch is speed, safety, and composability to take on broadly Solana and Ethereum. Now, that does not denigrate the other major protocols, many of which are partners of Encode, the Polygon, the Polkadot, rather, the Monads, the many others, the L2s, for example. But broadly, I think as the two major market cap ones, we tend to compare protocols with newer ones with Solana and Ethereum. Now, there's a hypothetical, now I'm going to call it hypothetical, there's a hypothetical sort of throughput, which is advertised as much higher than Solana and Ethereum, which again emphasizes the theoretical performance factor for Aptos. I might add that in reality, it's a little bit more difficult because of Aptos is a newer ecosystem than the other two, but certainly by design, it's designed to be a bit faster. But unfortunately, real-time metrics do significantly trail the more mature ecosystems. That does owe to their maturity more than anything. So we're going to talk specifically a little bit about the MOVE programming language first. And the first thing to say is it's a statistically typed, formally verified programming language. We talked about it being originally designed by the DM team. It is inspired by Rust. So typically I say that you need to be fairly competent with Rust itself to be wanting to move on to MOVE. Now, there's a key factor these days, which is that coding has become, I'm going to call it streamlined. You still need to be a developer, but AI has made things easier. Now, I think particularly with the more security-focused languages like Rust and MOVE, you still want to understand what you're writing. There's also a certain complexity, but I'm sure you are doing so already. But I would encourage you to be using AI tools in writing your smart contracts you should be using them, quite frankly. And anyway, if you know Rust, you'll have a good time with MOVE. I mean, jumping straight from Solidity to MOVE is going to be a bit of a big leap, though not impossible. You may want to learn MOVE as your first protocol, first programming language rather, but that's sort of up to you. It's at its core, it's a resource-orientated program. Please don't you tell it's not written with ChatGPT, because that's a really bad spelling error. What we're going to focus on is that digital assets like currencies and NFTs are treated as first-class citizens, as the main resources. This is in stark contrast to languages like Solidity, where we don't put resources first, and typically, therefore, we get a lot of errors or a lot of potential bugs or potential security vulnerabilities around the movement of assets. We all know, have heard about the many exploits that happen within the Ethereum ecosystem. It owes a little bit to how we're going to treat assets and resources within our smart contracts coding. Move is also enforcing, much like Rust, strict rules on how resources can be handled. Now, I'm not going to go into too much technical depth there. We will do so in the next workshop, but this is what I want you to sort of be seeing as the sort of differences. A resource, therefore, can never be accidentally copied or implicitly discarded. It can only be explicitly moved between different storage locations. It's forcing you to think about the movement and allocation of resources, assets, NFTs as examples when you're making transactions or executing code. And this is going to hopefully stop or prevent accidental security issues. The fundamental design choice then ensures that assets behave as intended and cannot be accidentally lost, duplicated, or stolen, as mentioned. For instance, a function that transfers a digital asset must explicitly move the asset from one account to the other. So we need to know who the receiving account is in that case as well, to stop us accidentally sending it to addresses accounts that we don't know or don't trust. Okay, so then let's obviously naturally just talk about security. And that the language's resource-oriented model directly mitigates these common vulnerabilities, such as re-entry attacks, asset manipulation at the language level. It's employing a robust type system and strict asset controls that prevent the common programming errors and security vulnerabilities before code ever gets deployed. Just as I mentioned, with a little bit more technical depth. Furthermore, the language bytecode is formally verified on chain with an emphasis on memory safety, resource management, and type enforcement to ensure correctness. Which then brings us on to the Move prover. Move's architecture is meticulously designed to reduce the attack surface of smart contracts. The attack surface means ways in which we can maliciously manipulate smart contracts, potential kind of bugs, potential violations, potential ways that the construction of the smart contracts can be used to be hacked. If you think as in development terms, and this is where AI, by the way, won't help you because it's not super good on the security side. How much is spent on audits, how much is spent on code reviews. Move is trying to minimize the potential for that even before we go to any sort of review stage. So that's pretty important as you choose a language. And ultimately, you are shopping around for an ecosystem and a language if you're making a bet within a certain ecosystem. Move obviously is a newer language that comes with, therefore, a bit of a moat versus choices other developers will be making that may more naturally will go to the JavaScript-based languages like Solidity. This formal verification tool utilizes a formal model and mathematical reasoning to validate that smart contracts behave as intended and meet specified security properties. This capability provides a layer of security that goes beyond traditional manual code audits, offering a powerful mechanism for building robust and reliable applications. So now let's compare this versus Solidity. So while it's popular and well adopted, we do have a history of exploits and around asset handling and security, as we have mentioned. I've made a little table here, which compares the sort of two. Now, to some extent this matters, to some extent doesn't. I actually think when you're picking a language, it's more about the quality of the ecosystem and the activity there. Certainly, if you look at the Ethereum ecosystem, it's actually not, I don't think, the technically best, but it has the strongest level of support, level of funding, level of activity, and therefore level of innovation, which does make you sort of ignore its deficiencies. Putting that aside, let's talk about the difference. So in terms of resource model, Solidity, we are object-orientated, whereas Move, we are resource-orientated. In terms of security paradigm, Solidity is requiring typically on external tools and audits. It's putting a lot of trust in the developer themselves. Move is trying to build in asset safety, having looked at what's happened with Solidity, and have formal verification built in. There's very strong static typing within Move, but weaker within Solidity, much like JavaScript. And the learning curve, therefore, is a little bit more significant on the Move side. Solidity a little bit easier. We then have this sort of concept of ecosystem maturity, which I've talked about. And then you also have parallel execution, which doesn't happen within Solidity and within the EVM environment, but is native to Move, which is a bit of an advantage on speed. And this all makes sense, right? A language that is more complicated and more difficult to learn, but you have a trade-off that for that trade-off, you get things we might care about, security, and a sort of a faster protocol. We also want to talk about Aptos's modular architecture. So modularity ensures that we can interchange consensus mechanisms, execution, and storage, whilst keeping the overall protocol functional. If I look at the example of versus Ethereum a few years ago, Ethereum had its hard fork when it switched from proof of work to proof of stake. And though that went very smoothly, it was extremely complex, difficult, and required a remarkable amount of coordination, which versus sort of other examples like Bitcoin's hard fork and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold and Litecoin and all of these the sort of alternatives, it shows you it doesn't always go super smoothly. This is a stark contrast to the more monolithic. Now, we started talking about monolithic and modular, actually probably with the involvement also of Celestia, which is another partner of Encode that you can do one of our programs. But this is comparing this to the more monolithic, everything is built in architecture, certainly of something like Ethereum or Solana. This allows for rapid development, faster release cycles, because you don't need to rebuild the whole chain every time you're sort of doing something. Therefore, no hard forks. Talking about consensus, nothing is actually too crazy here. We're using a delegated proof of stake model. Encode acts as a validator, not of the Aptos network, but many other protocols. We can stake to the networks we support. Delegated proof of stake means that we have a strong concept of, we have proof of stake. Proof of stake means the reputation system we use, the way we sort of figure out who to endorse, which validators to sort of respect the most, to kind of trust transactions with, is relative to how big their stake is. And bad acting, incompetent acting, involves a sort of slashing of a particular stake, and therefore less access to reward. And delegated just means that we're allowing stakers to delegate to bigger stakers, or allowing holders to stake to a certain number of other stakers. This does involve a little bit more centralization, because in game theoretical terms, if there are a limited number of, if we are saying that transaction prioritization and the rewards will go to the bigger stakers, naturally they're going to make the most money, be able to invest more in infrastructure. They have a sort of longer track record. So when you're thinking about who to delegate, you're probably going to go with them. That does lead to a little bit of centralization, but also gives you sort of a very robust sense of consensus. And this is shared by other major protocols as well, not too dissimilar from Solana, for instance. This is getting a little bit technical, but good to know. We use Aptos BFT v4, a pipeline Byzantine fault tolerant protocol. This protocol, building on the hot stuff model, enhances communication efficiency and reduces latency by streamlining the voting process when we are validating transactions. Unlike older systems where nodes communicate with every other node, Aptos BFT-v4 has nodes communicate primarily with the block leader, which massively reduces the total number of meshes in the system. Now, most ecosystems, most protocols choose a consensus mechanism that makes trade-offs around voting, and how we come to have confidence that a certain state has been achieved, and then communicate that state. Aptos is one example of it, and we see more and more innovation around this as different ecosystems emerge and mature. We also have the concept of a quorum store. It organizes transactions into batches that are shared across validators. And block STM, this is parallel execution leading to high throughput and low latency. So Aptos can dynamically detect dependencies at runtime without any input from the user. This is quite useful for your development process. And the transactions are executed speculatively. And if a conflict is detected, the failed transaction is aborted and re-executed. Again, very important when we are building and for having security baked in. We also have the concept of the jellyfish Merkle tree, JMT design, which to store blockchain state. I'm going to throw way more detail than is actually needed, certainly for building in the concurrent hackathon, but I'm just giving you a little bit of explanation about how the protocol really sort of works and may change your decision-making process. Which is the jellyfish Merkle tree is a sparse Merkle tree optimized for log-structured merge tree based key value storage systems like RockDB. This also basically means we can shard partitions to distribute the load across the network. Sharding, also used by Near Protocol, allows us to have maintain a bit more efficiency, a bit more speed of transaction handling. And then when we talked about this very high TPS of Aptos, it's powered by things like this. We also have the concept of state synchronization, very important when you have sharding, but we're not going to go into it now. So putting this all together, nice little chart here. We had one earlier. Let's talk about the theoretical numbers. So all of this does allow us to have a very high TPS, transactions per second. There are 3 different consensus. Aptos is kind of similar to proof of stake, shared by Ethereum and Solana. Solana also has the concept of proof of history, which I think I have a very nice lecture from a few years ago explaining proof of history, which I'm sure could be pasted somewhere. The real-time transaction per second is actually lower. I think, again, because of the maturity of the ecosystems. The finality is much quicker. Block time is much lower. But Aptos crucially has a much lower number of validators, which does introduce a degree of centralization here. Which brings us to use cases, which is, I encourage you ahead of, we'll look into them more in the workshops to come, but I encourage you ahead of the hackathon. I think the key one is obviously DeFi. I think this is the key use case of crypto as a whole. It's native interaction with money and finance and the sort of composability of money and innovation around it. Aptos is an ecosystem in which, especially with all security and speed allowances, assurances, means DeFi can work extremely well. So things we're talking about here are stablecoins, lending protocols, exchanges, options, covered calls. All of these would be things I'd very much like to see. I think particularly innovation around stablecoins. NFTs, which also links to the other main one, which is gaming. NFTs, collectabilities, voting systems, identification, even linked into the maybe some sort of DeFi application and ways of doing that. I think the voting use case here is probably where the vote exists as an NFT linked to exists as a very nice one. And gaming, of course, I think gaming very hard to do. Games, I don't think you can shoehorn games into crypto into games, but the centralization of Aptos, I think, suits gaming very well. In particular, we've had a game out of Encode called Footing. Footing is a football manager game where the clubs and the players are NFTs. So you own a club. That club has a set of metadata, a stadium, a quality of academy for producing future players, a home field advantage, a sort of quality of supporters, and a set of NFTs, which are the players, which can then be traded on a transfer market. So this is taking the concept of sports and football management and embedding NFTs natively to that. That's done very well out of Encode. It came out of a hackathon, an accelerator we did. So I encourage you to look at that use case for future inspiration, and then think, okay, how can I use the native features of Aptos and blockchain, crypto as a whole, Web3 as a whole, to make that game better, not sort of shoehorn it in. I've added a few sort of, we're going to do this in more depth. I've added a kind of little bit more, and these slides will be shared on the platform post lecture. I've added a few good examples of projects in the Aptos ecosystem. You shouldn't copy them, but you can see how they do things. Maybe interact with the teams as well on these sort of 3 different use cases. So what is the developer pitch here? I sort of talked about it a little bit, alluded to it. One is obviously Move. Either if you know it natively, which I'd be surprised, it's pretty new, or you're Rust-based but have lost confidence in Rust, or you want to focus on speed and security. If you're using Move, like the Movement project, for instance, though it is a rival L1, clearly, or rather, if you're using Move, you should work within Aptos. But also, if you are convinced by Move, that's a pretty big selling point for Aptos. Clearly, we're prioritizing performance a little bit in favor at the cost of centralization and parallel execution as well to kind of fuel that. And this sort of modular architecture means, look, we know there are lots of different protocols you can pick, and the strength of ecosystem, which we'll look at in later and DeFi in later workshops might be the convincing factor. But positions Aptos well in a otherwise extremely competitive market, even within the Move ecosystem, Mr. movements as examples. Quick word, I try not to talk about tokens, but because tokens have a functional use, a utility, but often it gets mixed with speculation and gambling. Two broad uses for the APT token: validate economics, incentivizing people to validate as part of the pure consensus. Why would I validate if there were no incentive or rewards? How would I be able to achieve even relative decentralization, i.e. not having one centralized party validating all transactions like a non-blockchain database? We need to have some very good validation economics. So you need the token for that. So it needs to have obviously some value accrued to it based on how many transactions are going through a network and how much it's being used, but also, of course, on-chain governance as well, and using that to evolve a very good network. That's one of the benefits of blockchains, that our systems broadly controlled by their users at a technical and democratic level, and that's, we think, a good thing. I think it is too. So a final word on what's coming up. This is a broad introduction. We have more workshops to come, starting on Thursday with an instruction to move, and then more specific ones about ecosystem and DeFi next week, and the London meetup. This is a short and sharp and clear series to prepare you for the ongoing hackathon that's run by the Aptos, our friends by Dora Hacks and by the Aptos team. Many of you have signed up for this program. We'll be watching asynchronously, and obviously turning up today synchronously. So we very much encourage you to go towards that program, or the other ones, which I'm sure Encode will be hosting in the due course and months. Let me have a quick look at Don will be in Nottingham. He might come down from London. All the things are recorded. They will go live. Apart from that, it looks like we might be taking a lot of questions on the Discord. Has anyone got any final questions? I'm annoyed at how not high quality the video is. Should have put my special camera on. Good. All right. I think we might call it a day then, guys, and take questions within our wonderful, beautiful platform. To remind you of the link, I would be very surprised if you don't have it already, but there is a potential that you don't. Let me do this. We built it. We vibe coded it. I am not ashamed to say it's doing brilliantly. You are one of the early users of it. If you ever have feedback for us, please do tell us on the Discord, DM us. But it's there for you to enjoy. Otherwise, I'll hand back to Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you very much. Really nice workshop there. I think I've got one or two things to say to you guys just on the admin front before we wrap up. So one of those, and they're just responses to questions that I've had over the last couple of days that you all might be interested in. So one, as Anthony said, the workshops are all recorded. They're available on the platform. And the second one is that by completing this program, you are eligible for some sort of accreditation that you can sort of put on your LinkedIn and say that you participated in the Encode Club program, and that does carry weight with employers and who are looking for jobs. They know us, and they like to see that you've been participating in our events and programs. So looking forward to seeing you all on Thursday, where we have our next workshop, which is an intro to Move. And as always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to either message in the Discord channel or to use our platform to send me a direct message and then I can get to your queries as and when you have them. So as I say, looking forward to seeing you on Thursday, and hopefully in a couple of weeks to seeing you guys in person too. So once again, thanks, Anthony, and we will see you all later this week. Goodbye.